Texans' biggest changes then to now. Let's go back a year. It is the locker room. I am Landry Locker. Texans off this week. They return to the field next week. We'll have 2 media availabilities. We know what we'll be looking for, what we'll be trying to see. If CJ Stroud is or is not going to throw, I think they should shut him down. I've made that very clear. You've gotten to this point. You've acknowledged that there's shoulder soreness. Just shut him down. Shut him down till training camp, and then we'll see what happens there. But if the acknowledgement is there that he has soreness or general soreness, as D'Amico Ryan said, just shut him down. And I anticipate that is a very likely thing. They've just completely mishandled it, but that's neither here nor there. We've talked about that a lot, both here and on SNL. But right now, I want to ask the question, what are the biggest changes that the Texans have had, the most significant changes that the Texans have had now as compared to last year? Things we were talking about last year and how much those have changed from then to now, and which ones have changed the most significantly. The answer is obvious for number one, and it's really not even close. We went from last year, if we just look at what happened and what we were saying a year ago, and rightfully so, the state of the offensive coordinator spot. If you would have told me, if you would have told anyone at this point last year that
damn it, Bobby,
would have been the most popular saying over the course of last season, I think a lot of people would have questioned that. Bobby Slowick had interviewed for multiple head coaching gigs. If you would have told me Bobby Slowick was going to be gone, I would have assumed that he got hired as a head coach, not that he got fired 1 year in. And I think that was the right choice. And I think he kind of got overexposed. I think the league kind of caught up to him. I think he kind of exposed himself as someone who couldn't adjust personnel wise. But this time last year, we were talking about Bobby Slowick, and we were talking about, is this guy going to end up being a head coach? And if so, when? And we were talking about the Texans with one of the most dynamic offenses we anticipated in the league, with one of the better wide receiver groups in the league, we thought, with Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Nico Collins. But now here we are, and you have a new offensive coordinator. You've gone from damn it, Bobby, to Nick. And really, it's just an uncertain mystery right now as to what Nick Caley is going to be. And I know there's excitement. I know there's intrigue. But when you think about it and you go back just a year ago and you remember what we were saying about Bobby Slowick, rightfully so, man, life comes at you fast. And that is by far, as we are a month and a half away from training camp, that is by far not even close the biggest change that we've seen for CJ Stroud and company. And speaking of CJ Stroud, at this point last year, we were talking about CJ Stroud, and we were talking about being on kind of the brink of being elite. This year's kind of a bounce back, but do we still look at CJ Stroud as someone who's close to getting to being an elite company? Because last year the conversation was, you pretty much had a good grasp of who the top 4 quarterbacks were. And CJ Stroud was in that second tier. I think he was a top 6 betting MVP favorite. This year, I think you can get him at 15, 20, 30 to 1 or something like that. And it almost feels like CJ Stroud, you're hoping that he can establish himself as someone that belongs on that second tier. Maybe that's an overreaction. Obviously, it's connected to what we had earlier, but at this time last year, that's what we were saying. CJ Stroud on the brink of becoming elite. So those are 2 big changes. You still feel good about CJ Stroud. We just don't know about Nick Caley, but you felt unbelievable about Bobby Slowick, and he's gone. Life comes at you fast. Other big changes for the Texans, the wide receiver. Wide receiver last year, you thought it was just solidified. I remember polls. There were polls of 4 wide receiver cores up there. You know the graphics, which wide receiver group has which is the best trio in the league. And the Texans were up there next to the Bengals and other squads. And the Texans were getting a lot of votes, rightfully so, with Nico Collins coming off a good year, Tank Dell coming off an awesome rookie year, Stephon Diggs, you brought him in. And now the wide receiver core, it looks completely different. You have Nico Collins. You have a couple of rookies. You've added Christian Kirk.
Captain Kirk has arrived. I repeat, Captain Kirk has arrived.
And then you've added a couple of pieces. You've kind of pushed John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson to the back of the depth chart. And while the feeling at quarterback is kind of unknown, the offensive coordinator is unknown, and we really don't know a lot about this receiving core, I don't necessarily think it's like a bad change. I think in a short time, and on the back end of last year, we had a pretty good grasp that the Texans were going to need some help at receivers, especially when Tank Dell went down against the Chiefs. You kind of had a good idea that Stephon Diggs with his torn ACL was likely not going to be back. And then you had a good idea that Tank Dell was likely not going to play football this year. So you knew that you needed to do some things at wide receiver. And in a short time, this has become a very intriguing wide receiver group. You might not feel as confident about them. Like nobody's going to be putting them up there as potentially one of the best wide receiver trios or groups in the league. But I think you feel good about the position. And I think you feel good about the future of the wide receiver position. Maybe even better than you did last year. Unless you just thought that Nico Collins and Tank Dell were going to be an uncanny duo for a long time ahead. You didn't know about Stephon Diggs. That was kind of a short-term thing. But you feel really good about the wide receiver group. So the wide receiver group has changed significantly, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad change. As we talk about the biggest changes for the Texans, Bobby Slowick, most certainly the obvious one. Then we look at the DBs, and I think this is the positive one. The defensive backs, last year, there was a ton of uncertainty. You didn't know what the safety position was going to look like. You didn't know about this skinny kid out of USC, Kalen Bullock. And you didn't know if Kamari Lassiter could be a guy that was he going to be an inside guy? Was he going to be an outside guy? They basically made him a day one starter going back to OTA's minicamp. This time last year, Kamari Lassiter was a starter, but there was still some talk about Jeff Okudah and CJ Henderson. And could these guys end up being the starters and Kamari Lassiter being a reserve? But this year, you feel awesome about your secondary. You've added CJ Gardner-Johnson. You've got Lassiter. You wonder if he's on the brink of becoming elite. Jimmy Ward is a super sub. Jalen Petrie, they found a role for him to where they felt comfortable enough to pay him among the top of being a nickel corner. Derek Stingley, one of the highest paid corner in the league. He established himself full season last year, kind of built on what he did the previous season. When it comes to the DBs, you feel incredibly great about the DBs. And it doesn't seem like that's something that's going to fall off when it comes to DBs. On the offensive side of the rock, the tight ends. You feel worse about the tight ends. You feel better about the DBs. You feel worse about the tight ends. Last year, you thought that Dalton Schultz would at least be a serviceable tight end. He was one of CJ Stroud's top targets the previous year. Just a horrific year for Dalton Schultz last year. Cade Stover, you didn't know much about him. I don't know that you feel awesome about Cade Stover. You feel good, but you don't feel awesome about him. And Brevin Jordan, he's gone from that guy that you looked at as someone that could break out to he's going to be recovering from a torn ACL, and you don't know how he fits into things. So the tight end position you feel worse about this year as compared to a year ago right now. You feel worse about it. Not awful, though, because it's not like you felt amazing about it. It's not like you had the confidence in the tight ends that you did in Bobby Slowick or the wide receiver group. But the tight end group, you feel kind of meh about. Then there's the offensive line. I think this one is interesting. You hear a lot about Laramie Tunsil. And the talk about Laramie Tunsil is, man, they got rid of their best offensive line. Yeah, you've all heard it. They got rid of their best offensive lineman, and this is a really bad offensive line, and now they have to figure some stuff out. I'm not giving myself credit, but I never trusted that offensive line last year. I wasn't as giddy. I wasn't as high on that offensive line last year. I feel kind of the same. Because I do think there is a much more, and this is just based on a couple of OTAs and really just the basic context clues of what having Laramie Tunsil as kind of the face, kind of leader of your offensive line, I think looks like, and the leader and the guy that the other offensive linemen are following. I feel like there's a little bit more urgency with this offensive line. I don't know if they're going to be good. I would bet against it. Can they be average? Perhaps. It's going to go back to the Nick Caley thing that we talked about at the beginning, but I feel kind of the same about the offensive line. I don't feel any worse. I don't feel any worse. I borderline feel better because I think it was addition by subtraction. I know that that's something that they've kind of refuted, rightfully so. They're going to protect players, but I think it's kind of addition by subtraction. So the offensive line, I kind of feel the same. I understand if anyone feels worse because there's not much to feel great about when it comes to the offensive line. Then we get to this question when it comes to Bobby Slowick. Why did Bobby Slowick fall off? What do you think the reason was for Bobby Slowick's fall off? Because I don't want to have a straw man argument, and I damn sure don't want to defend Bobby Slowick because I don't think he was equipped to lead during extremely adverse times. Maybe that comes with never being a position coach. Maybe it comes with the personality. But I don't think Bobby Slowick was equipped to lead during extremely adverse situations. I just don't think that. I don't think they think that either. I also think he was kind of robotic. You've kind of heard them take some subtle shots at Bobby Slowick without meaning to, where they've talked about not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. That might be, having Dalton Schultz block, throwing bubble screens to Robert Woods. That might be what that means. But why do you think Bobby Slowick did fall off? Because there's kind of a little bit of a double standard, it feels like, when we talk about Bobby Slowick. Because I 100% supported. I was on record in season saying that they needed to make this change. And I think it became apparent, injuries or not. But why is it that there appears to be, and we saw it in the chat right off the top, a notion that CJ Stroud can't succeed behind this offensive line? It's impossible. I'm not saying I disagree, but Bobby Slowick doesn't get that same treatment. Is it just because of the other things with Bobby Slowick that we talked about? Does that matter? But if the offensive line made it impossible for CJ Stroud to function, should we look at that the same way with Bobby Slowick? Furthermore, why was there success in year one? Was it as simple as a league caught up to his tendencies? That's possible. That tends to happen. That's always a talking point, specifically with quarterbacks. And you can throw that in there with offensive coordinators, obviously. But did the offensive line prevent Bobby Slowick from doing his thing as well? Someone says he started to being predictable. Ja'Cory says probably became too arrogant. I don't know where the hell that comes from. I don't think Bobby Slowick was that arrogant. Is it his age? I don't think age had anything to do with it with Bobby at all. We've seen a lot of young coaches have success. But it was a hell of a fall off. And I don't think any of us saw this coming. I damn sure didn't. Did I think Bobby Slowick was just assured to be the boy wonder future head coach? No, I didn't think that. I thought he started sounding more like a head coach after doing the interviews. But if you would have told me Bobby Slowick, if I would have told any of you, and I think we can all be honest with ourselves. If I would have told any of you 365 days ago, Bobby Slowick's not going to be the offensive coordinator, you would have all just assumed he's a head coach somewhere. And he's gone, and he's kind of despised, and he kind of got overexposed. So again, life goes at you. Life comes at you fast. Mentioned CJ Stroud and the belief that he was on the edge of being elite last year. Maybe there's still that belief for some. I think just you can just get into that second tier. You feel good about that. Somewhere between Dak Prescott and the Trevor Lawrence category of quarterbacks that are going to get paid. I don't expect CJ Stroud to be Josh Allen. I don't expect him to be Joe Burrow. I don't expect him to be Patrick Mahomes. But if he can just kind of establish himself in that second tier, better than Tua, up there with in the same company as Herbert, which he's already in, he's going to get paid regardless. But if you can feel solid about that after this season, I think it would be good. I'm trying to make realistic expectations for CJ Stroud. Baby steps. It was a big giant step in year one, but I'm not expecting that in year two, or in year three. But we were expecting it last year in year two. So that can change as well. But just establish yourself as clearly better than Tua, clearly better than Trevor Lawrence. And there's something about Trevor Lawrence that really caught my attention today that I want to. I got a strong recommendation surrounding a lost art that I think that y'all should check out. And I'll tell you what that is. It involves Trevor Lawrence. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But CJ Stroud just established himself as a second tier guy, unquestioned. He gets the contract, and then maybe the best is ahead. And we hope that shoulder's okay. Again, neither here nor there. We've talked about the shoulder. We'll probably talk about the shoulder next week, depending on what does or doesn't happen with Stroud. But who is on the edge this year of becoming elite? Is there anyone else that's kind of on the edge of becoming elite? I would say Will Anderson Jr. If some might say that Will Anderson Jr. is already there, but I would say Will Anderson Jr. is right there on the edge of becoming an elite pass rusher. To the point where if you told me, if we're looking back a year, if we're looking forward a year, and you told me that one of the top 3 picks from the 2023 draft, that one of the top 3 picks was going to be elite, I would probably put my money on Will Anderson. That's where my money would go. I would bet on Will Anderson over CJ Stroud at this point. I don't think that's an insult to CJ Stroud. I think that just speaks to what Will Anderson is, how he looks this offseason. He worked out with Myles Garrett. I would put my money on Will Anderson. Someone else who I think is kind of on the edge of becoming elite. You see him in the thumbnail, Kamari Lassiter. As far as being a number 2 corner, do I think Kamari Lassiter is close to establishing himself as a number 1? I don't. But as far as being a beyond good number 2 corner and continuing to get better, I think Kamari Lassiter is on that edge too. I think this defense is not, the defense is right there when it comes to being elite. And it's in large part because of a second-year corner and a third-year edge guy in Will Anderson. Those are the 2 guys. Last year it was CJ. Can he become elite? That was one of the big talking points. Now I think it's Kamari Lassiter as a number 2 corner and Will Anderson as an edge guy. Those are my 2 guys that I would say are on the edge of becoming elite. Nico Collins is another name that pops up. I think we know what Nico Collins is. Nico Collins is really, really good. Nico Collins is an unquestioned top 10 receiver when he's healthy. Now, staying on the field consistently, we've only seen that one time really from Nico Collins, and he missed 2+ games that year. The Jets game doesn't count as a missed game. He left in the first quarter. But we know that Nico Collins, we know what he is. He's really, really good. But I think Will Anderson and Kamari Lassiter are the 2 guys where the arrow is unquestionably pointing up. And I think with everything that they have around him, the coach that they have, there's no uncertainty on the defensive side of the rock. You got one of the best defensive minds in the game in DeMeco Ryans. You got one of the best. You got one of the best. They got elite-ish guys on the opposite side. Derek Stingley's already elite, opposite of Lassiter. And then you have Daniil Hunter opposite of Will Anderson. So those are duos. And the youngest part of those duos is on the edge of becoming elite. Nico is elite. Sure. I mean, yeah, with CJ Stroud, you can't argue that. That can't really be argued. Do you factor in the injuries or not? But yeah, Nico Collins with CJ Stroud when he is on the field. Yeah, it's hard to argue that that's not elite production. There's just a little bit there's a little bit of question marks. Other big changes, footnotes. We were expecting a breakout year from Christian Harris last year. I told y'all I bought the Christian Harris penny stock. There's a completely different outlook of Christian Harris to where he's almost forgotten. Now, DeMeco Ryans, believe it or not, he can commit to guys being ready for camp. He said Christian Harris is going to be ready for camp, which kind of tells you something. Because last year he wouldn't even acknowledge, while Christian Harris was walking around in a boot, whether he was or wasn't going to be back. But he's saying he's going to be ready for camp. Wouldn't commit to CJ Stroud throwing this upcoming week. I think that kind of tells you something. The general soreness is probably going to continue. Now, does the message change with DeMeco Ryans when it comes to CJ Stroud? Probably not. I think DeMeco Ryans is basically looking at the two media sessions as the final couple days of school. He's just going to try to get through them. And they're going to have a prepared message about CJ Stroud. And then he's probably going to try to say that there's no more questions on it. But he says Christian Harris is coming back. And I'm buying the Christian Harris stock. It's much different now. Last year it was expensive because Christian Harris was the most commonly referred to guy when we asked the basic ass offseason question, who's destined for a breakout? It was Christian Harris. This year, I mean, when they signed EJ Speed, there was talk, how does this impact Christian Harris? It doesn't. As long as he's out there. But we'll see what happens with that. TXTSAR says that they need Christian to stay healthy because Aziz can't cover. I know you're probably, and you're right, but last year, the Kansas City game, part of the reason that Aziz had to cover so much is because they didn't have Petrie and they didn't have Jimmy Ward in that nickel role, which is ideally the guy that you would like to have on Travis Kelce. I think they've committed a lot more to that role now, to where Jimmy Ward is kind of your super sub. Jalen Petrie's the guy. They have Jalen Reed. But I think that had as much to do with it as him just not being able to cover. But you are right. Christian Harris is definitely a better cover guy than Aziz. But part of the reason with Aziz being in that position, I think it was much deeper than Christian Harris not being out there. I think that would be something to keep an eye on. Apparently, it's National Cheese Day. I did not know this, and I don't know who the hell makes up these national days. Where do these come from? How do these become a thing? Like, does the president pass bills where these things become things? There's so many national days now. There's almost like 8 national days a day, and now we're getting National Cheese Day. No idea what it is. National Cheese Day. No idea where this stuff comes from. Don't know who decided it. Don't know where it came from. No idea when it comes to the National Cheese Day at all. But those are the biggest changes that I can think of from the Texans a year ago to now. and the biggest kind of flops. And you feel good about some, you feel bad about others. And there's some uncertainty when it comes to the most important one of all, which is
Nick.
What the hell is a Nick Caley offense? We have no idea. Speaking of offense, and speaking of Sean McVay, guys, Liam Cohen. There was a feature on Liam Cohen on ESPN.com that I strongly recommend, although I will warn you that if you're somebody who just kind of wants to dismiss the Jags and not really be intrigued by them, you might not want to look at it. But I put the link up in the chat just now. It's from Michael DeRocco, the Jags reporter for ESPN. It's a really interesting piece. And I think this Liam Cohen guy, the last time someone got that made fun of in an opening press conference, it was Nick Sirianni. You remember the disastrous Nick Sirianni opening press conference with the Philadelphia Eagles? He ended up okay. That Nick Sirianni thing. I'm not sitting here saying Liam Cohen's going to be coaching in multiple Super Bowls in a half decade, but his body of work, his path towards becoming a coach is extremely interesting. And it's extremely intriguing. And I have respect for Shane Steichen in Indy. There's just been limitations at the quarterback position. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is elite, but I think if he's ever going to be a serviceable quarterback, maybe getting in that second tier that we previously mentioned with CJ Stroud, I think this is going to be the guy to do it. A lot of the stuff, a lot of the reason that we talk about Nick Caley and why people are excited about Nick Caley, he has that, and it's basically on steroids. It's a gassed up version. Started out as a kid following his dad around, who was a football coach, went to UMass, played ball, was a grad assistant. Sean McVay hired him multiple times. He was actually with McVay during the down Rams year when Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford were hurt. He got Baker Mayfield ready to play. He had a big hand in getting Baker Mayfield ready to play. Remember when Baker Mayfield got signed during the week and then won a game for the Rams? Liam Cohen was apparently the guy that helped him cram for that, which is why Tampa Bay hired him as their OC. And then he ended up getting the Jags gig. I think Liam Cohen is very, 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 very intriguing. And I could very easily see him end up being a hell of a coach. I think Shane Steichen's a hell of a coach. I don't think that Callahan is. I think he sucks with the Titans. They'll be hiring a new coach sooner rather than later. But the Liam Cohen thing, it's a good read. It's a strong read, and I know that the written word when it comes to sports is kind of a lost art. I thought this was a really good feature by Michael DeRocco of ESPN. Again, I put that in the chat if y'all want to check that out. Very intrigued. MJ asks who I have winning the finals, Thunder or Pacers. I mean, you got to go with the Thunder, right? I do think Rick Carlisle is a really good coach, but you got to go with the Thunder. Significant favorites. Not even close. I think it's like 6-7-1. But yeah, check out that feature on ESPN.com, Liam Cohen. Good offseason read for sure. Joe Mixon. There's been talk about Joe Mixon. There's been talk about the health of Joe Mixon. The one thing we do know is Joe Mixon's gaming has not suffered. Quite frankly, if you are hurt, gaming is probably a good thing to be doing. It's a very good thing to be doing if you are hurt. Who knows? But I'm seeing Joe Mixon play online. And I'm not going boomer. I guess I'm going millennial. Are they ever going to have like a boomer millennial line when it comes to breaking this stuff down? because I see all these kids playing, and I understand the benefits of new gaming. Like, you could find a game right now, but I miss the days when, and I don't even know if kids still do this with the technology, but there used to be a time back in my day, 90s, 2000s, when you would just fire up the game. Sometimes you'd have to go to GameStop. You would have a bunch of buddies over, and you would sit around the TV and play the game. Sometimes you would be drinking. Sometimes you would be on that
high-grade marijuana called Kush on the streets.
But you would just sit around, you'd play 21-0 skunk, lots of trash talking, peanut gallery like crazy, just comments all over the place. Sometimes the guy that was playing or losing would get more frustrated with the peanut gallery than he would the actual opponent. Every time he scored a touchdown, there was trash talk. There was something going on. And even before the high grade and the alcohol came into play, you were just on the game. Juice boxes, even juice box era. I miss those days. I miss those days. I miss the good old gathering to play the game. And I don't know if kids still do that, but I miss those days. I know Joe Mixon's embracing this. I think this is going to be a good question for Joe Mixon. And I'm going to ask Joe Mixon this. I know you've kind of embraced the new age of gaming, but what about the old age? What are the pros and cons of each? And which one do you like better? I got a feeling that Joe Mixon will at least appreciate the old days. I don't know if that's called being a boomer. I don't know if it's called being a millennial. I'm sure they'll come up with some sort of term. But my God, it's a damn shame seeing these guys sitting in basements with headsets on, in dark rooms, no snacks, no company around, just getting on the game. You used to have to plan it. Man, I can't play the game today. I'm going to beat your ass on Saturday. I'll play you on Saturday. And now it's like so common that you can play, that you can fire it up, that I don't even know. It's almost like back when you used to get on the game, you probably, like a lot of people, especially if it's like in the same complex or in the same area, you're probably doing it a few days a week if you're lucky or if you're able to. But now it's like they're playing every night. It's almost like the NFL. Like the NFL, the one advantage the NFL has, and you'll hear me say this all the time, is magnitude, because there are fewer games. There's build up for the week, and you feel good about yourself when you win a game. You feel good. You feel better going into work. You feel you're a winner for a week until the next game. Baseball doesn't have that. Football doesn't have that. And it's not as much about the sport as it is the magnitude of the sport. If basketball or baseball were 16, 18, 17, 18 game seasons, it would be just as live. It would be just as sick. But now they're playing every day. It's not the same. They're just yelling into a headset. They're not by each other. There's no peanut gallery. There might be some people. You can't hear them. You see Joe Mixon playing these games. There's a bunch of voices. You don't know where they're coming from. It's not the guy in the corner talking smack. It's not the bitter guy who just got his ass whooped and skunked, sitting there talking smack as the guy that skunked him is losing his next game. And then the guy who skunked him is looking back saying, well, I beat you, bitch, 21-0. Shut up, blah, blah, blah. And the other guy's just sitting there laughing. They don't have that anymore. It's a lost art. It sucks. I know that there's a lot of improvements that have happened with Gen Z, but my gosh, just such a great time back in the day to game. The EA Sports golden age, right when 2K was kind of creeping up. They don't get it. They don't get it. It's just a bunch of punk asses yelling in their headset. It's cool. It's great. It's probably safer. But man, I miss the days of just getting in the game and just, God, you're talking crap all over the place. Look up. It's 3:00, man. We're still playing the game. Man, miss those days. Appreciate y'all for coming through. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like. Be sure to ride along. Be sure to remember the good days. My goodness. Getting on the game. We got to try to bring that back in some way, shape, or form. I think SNL, myself, Cody Stewart, can try to bring that back. I'm going to ask Mixon about that. But as much as things change, they change significantly. They don't remain the same, especially if you're talking about the biggest changes when it comes to the Texans. Appreciate y'all for coming through. Always remember, when it comes to this Texans stuff, whether you're gaming in a dark room by yourself or you're gaming with 7 guys talking smack and having to wait their turn, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Appreciate y'all for rolling through.
It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too. Landlocked. Got the game in the headlock. Localize every time. Can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not too. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days. Opinions to give. We got takeaways. If it's up, then it's up. We number 1. You don't need to try your luck. Locker Room. Yeah, we in the